this new seminar series. My name is Christine Griffin and I'm a research fellow here at Resources Environment Development Group. I would like to begin by acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on whose traditional lands we live today. Today we are on unceded, vulnerable and Ngambri land, and we pay our respects to elders past and present, and to all the continuing connections to these lands, waters and skies. So today I'm excited to introduce Michiel Piersma, who will present his research titled The Production of Absent, Joyful and Vibrant Landscapes, a Walking Study of Youth and Politics. Michiel is a political scientist who teaches at the School of Politics and International Relations here at the ANU, and he holds a PhD in politics from the University of Liverpool. And so today he's going to walk us through a methodology that he's developed, which is a walking methodology to explore the politics of landscapes. So Michiel will present his research for about 30 minutes, and then we will open for about 20-25 minutes of Q&A discussion. So just make sure your mics are on mute for those online, and phones are on silent. And thanks, I'll pass over to Michiel.
Thank you very much, Christina. Good afternoon, everyone in the room and also online. I'd just like to indeed echo Christina's words on acknowledging the country on which we're meeting today, the country of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and the lands on which I hold this talk today. I will actually move from the lands here that we find us in today to the country of Bosnia and Herzegovina for the first few minutes of this talk. I'll show a couple of videos of the river with which we will be thinking today and about which we will be talking today. If you would like to start the videos, we'll have a sense of place. That's just a very brief and incomplete introduction of the environments in which I have done my research. This is the river Drina in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and this is also the river around which I have done my PhD research, on which I am presenting today. And I just wanted to check mostly for the people here in the room. Has anyone ever been to Bosnia and Herzegovina? Just for a sense of context, okay. On movies, that's nice. I'll give, actually this talk here today will mostly be about the specific methodologies, the walking methodologies with which I have approached these environments, so to say, and the people that live in these environments. But the river, as you'll see, and this is also why I decided to start the presentation with those rivers, the river plays a very important role in understanding and approaching the environments of Bosnia and Herzegovina in my research. In fact, this river has proven to be a key actor in the human-nature relations and the politics of those relations and the politics of landscape as I encountered them in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the main issue that I'd like to discuss here today is how those walking methodologies that I will introduce later on, how those walking methodologies have very much enabled me to understand these relations between human beings and their non-human counterparts in those regions, and also to understand how those relations are not just given relations, but how they are politicized, so to say. So I'm making a case for the use of such walking methodologies to understand the politics of landscape better. If you could just briefly go to the next slide. So indeed, as Christina said before, the topic of my entire PhD is the production of absent, joyful and violent landscapes, a walking study of youth and politics. And what I'd like to do here today is introduce those walking methodologies or walking interviews as a methodological intervention in studying the politics of landscape, so to say. And just to briefly situate my research, I am trained as a political scientist, international relations. Those are sort of the fields of study that I have found myself in for most years of my education, so to say. But in general, as I will discuss later as well, walking methodologies is in its essence an interdisciplinary, a cross-disciplinary exercise, so to say, and an approach to landscape. So therefore, I also see it as some kind of intervention, so to say, towards the methods of the standard methods of political science and international relations. And being here at Crawford today, I'm also very excited just to hear from people not from those traditional disciplines of political science and international relations, to hear what your takes are on such a thing as walking methodologies. I know there's geographers, political ecologists, sustainability studies, people that might have other ideas on space, walking, movement, and so on, and politics as well. So I'd like to hear from you in the Q&A after my talk as well. So on the next slide, I have just given us a brief overview of sort of this tradition of walking as a method, but also walking as movement in the social sciences. I think it is a very broad topic, so to say, that many different social sciences have used in their ways of understanding the social world around us. Actually, in the top left, you see the book by Rebecca Solnit, Wanderlust, which is an excellent book in which she describes the different histories of walking and how walking has been used also as a political act. And in fact, she gives 5 reasons why walking, the very act of walking, is so important in our contemporary society. And I'll just read out those 5 reasons why walking is important. It's also just to situate the relevance of walking in understanding our world, so to say. So she sees it in 5 different ways as a relevant act of resistance, so to say, to contemporary society. First of all, because it is a means of bringing people together to protest undemocratic institutions. Secondly, because it provides an alternative to carbon-based modes of transportation. Thirdly, because walking is free. Fourthly, because it reminds us of the pleasure we may find, if we are lucky, in our own embodiment. And fifth, because walking celebrates the time in between more economically productive activities, which might otherwise be seen as wasted. So in a way, it's a resistance between other modes of transport, other modes of being economically active, and other modes of being in this world, so to say. And I think in general, how social science has understood walking is indeed very broad. There's basically 3 different ways in which walking has been used in the broader social sciences. So first of all, walking can be seen as an area of research. So what does the walk itself, how is that mediated by cultural, social, and political factors? Who can walk where, so to say, and which landscapes are designed to be walkable, so to say, to be traversable. Very much focusing on the walk as an act. Secondly, walking has been used to disseminate, in fact, findings of research. So not to see it as the starting point, but very much see it as the end point of research, to actually also bring findings back to communities, to work with communities whose lives have been researched in the past, and use walking as the dissemination of findings. And secondly, thirdly, this is the point where I tie in my research most, is using walking as a method, so to say. And there's a few books here on the screen that sort of show that breadth of research that has been done. You'll see the Borthwick et al. Book that is much more rooted in walking as an art practice. So actually also quite a few people in Australia that have been using walking practices as an art practice, so to say. I'm thinking of Sarah Truman at Melbourne Uni a while ago, Sarah Pink and Monash, Misha Myers and Deacon. They all have been active working with communities to see walking as a practice of creative practices, so to say. There's also strong traditions in sociology and geography, which you can see through, for instance, the book by O'Neill and Roberts, and a recent paper by Mason, and a long list of other geographers who more so see walking as a method, so to say. So O'Neill and Roberts, for instance, they are two sociologists and criminologists. They have used walking to basically research the different biographical lives of people through the act of walking. So they have used the walk, so to say, as a way of understanding people's journey throughout a neighborhood, but also throughout life. So combining this temporal and spatial understanding of a community throughout life, but also throughout the space of a particular neighborhood. And again, in Australia, there's a few people working on walking methodology as very much as a method. For instance, earlier this week when I had this workshop with Professor Leslie Head, she has worked with a colleague when she was in Wollongong still on suburban nature talk, and they together have also done walking interviews with local residents in a particular part of Wollongong. That's been over 15 years ago. So, and there hasn't been much done recently in Australia, but just to sketch a picture of what has happened here. And especially from sociology and geography, they try to understand how indeed public space is produced and negotiated and contested, so to say. By, for instance, also using the word of Michel Piersma, the practice of everyday life, which is seen as he tries to understand how the walk and the pedestrian, so to say, basically creates this very space through the act of walking. So on a very everyday level, so to say. Overall, all of those traditions, I think, are rooted in critical political thinking. They try to criticize the sort of the romantic, with a capital R, idea of a flaneur, like a male undisturbed walker throughout space who is not subject to any kinds of regulations, any kind of disturbed space, so to say. And in general, walking methodologies or walking interviews, I think they tie in with more recent so-called turns in social sciences of the embodied, the relational, and the reflexive, so to say. And on some of those, I'll come back in my own research as well to show how they tie in with those trends in academia, so to say. Very briefly, also a reason why I am doing the walking methodology, so to say, my own research is that there is very little in political science and international relations, so to say. There's a handful, increasingly in recent years, a handful of studies on walking in political science and IR, but the focus more in that research is on how walking is a collective political act. So looking at death marches, for instance, and also forced death walks after ethnic cleansing and genocide, so to say, and which is very important and very relevant, but it's less seen as a methodological choice in political science IR spheres. So I'm trying, with this research, trying to bridge that gap that might be politics and IR, trying to understand how we can see the political better through walking methodologies. All right. That is a very, or maybe not so brief, overview of walking methodologies in the social sciences. And those 3 points that you see here on the screen of what can walking methodologies do is also something that I'll come back to in my own when I talk about the execution of my own research. So first of all, I think it can, through walking methodologies, we can understand differently what and who is political, and also which questions are being asked about what kind of behavior, what kind of actions, and which human beings or non-human beings can be considered political, so to say. It's also, secondly, a way to think critically about space and theory. And thirdly, it ties in with more critical ideas about who is indeed able to create the research that we are doing. So tying in with ideas of co-production, participatory action research, and so on. Again, I'll come back briefly to those points in the execution of my own walks. So on the next slide, just to move to my own research very briefly, to situate where we are. We are indeed in Bosnia and Herzegovina for my own research. On this map here, you'll see in the eastern part of the country, with close to the border with Montenegro, you see the town in which I did my research. This town is called Foča. On the map, you also see the main river that actually flows alongside the town of Foča, which is the river Drina, with which I opened my research, my talk earlier. I'll keep situating the town very briefly, but I think it's good to understand that Foča and Bosnia and Herzegovina are situated in the former Yugoslavia. So it's a post-socialist state, so to say, since 1992. It's also, so to say, very much a so-called post-conflict environment because of the mass violence, the genocide that took place in eastern Bosnia, in which Foča is based between 1992 and 1995. In fact, not just Foča was subjected to this mass violence. When I say Foča, I mean the Muslim population of Foča was subjected to this violence, but in fact, many different towns throughout the basin of this river Drina that we have seen before. Throughout this basin, in all different towns and villages, the Muslim population has been wiped out between 1992 and 1995 by the Bosnian Serb population. And that's also something that has shaped the environments in which the people today in Foča live, so to say. And in general, it's good to know that the Drina Basin and eastern Bosnia is very much a so-called periphery in the country. The region is politically, socially, and economically rendered to be a periphery with low density, population density rates, and a low economic growth as well. All right. If we can go to the next slide to just have an overview of the walks that I did in this town of Foča. Again, as I said before, very briefly, why I decided to in fact do those walking interviews is because in those fields of study that I find myself in, which is political science, IR, but also generally area studies of Southeast Europe and Bosnia, there has been a long, strong tradition of very narrowly defining the political subject, so to say, of Bosnia, but also what is political behavior, so to say. That is very much limited to just the standard political definition of being electorally active, so to say, or either resisting to existing political systems. And with me, many other peoples have been analyzing that stems from extractive Eurocentric circles of knowledge production about a region from Western European political centers, so to say, and basically rendering this part of Europe as the other, so to say, about which knowledge can be produced from those Western centers. And that has led to very limited understanding of what a political being can be, so to say, in those parts of Europe. So for me, that was in fact an inspiration to approach the so-called fields, but also the knowledges that we rely on differently, so to say. So I actually decided through those walking methodologies to start off by walking, by joining the people that I knew in this town, by joining them on their walks and talking about basically the ideas, the issues, the everyday lives as they encountered them, so to say. And what I would like to do, in fact, is to just present or actually read out a couple parts of my PhD research, of my fieldwork, in fact, through which I hope the added value of walking methodologies becomes a little bit more clear, and I'll tie in on some of the points, the added value of walking methodologies as I have discussed them before. Very briefly before I do that, the organization of the interviews was, so to say, very much reliant on improvisation. So with all of my interlocutors, we normally just met up in whichever part of town. And the first question that I asked them basically, can you lead me through your version of Foggia, your version of this town? Can you show me your town to me, so to say? Some interviews lasted 45 minutes, and some of them lasted up to 2.5 hours. Really dependent on many different factors, how we felt, what kind of day it was, whether people had other, whether they have really fleshed out ideas of what they wanted to show me, or whether it was just a brief, short walk around town, so to say. I'll just briefly now read out a first part of this fieldwork. After I completed the first interviews, I was left with somewhat of a dissatisfied feeling. In many ways, the walks were successful. My interlocutors led me through town. I had been able to converse in their language, and I had hit the record button. I also noticed how some of my interlocutors that now took me on a tour of the city adopted what I interpreted as a tourist guide voice and posture. They shared facts about Foggia, its rivers and mountain peaks, and how many tourists would visit for rafting. I had hoped to have gained more of an insider status with them and to hear more ethnographic details, so that they would not bother reciting a tourist brochure. It was when I was walking and talking with Stefan, who is in the final year of high school and in the summer months works in a rafting camp, that I started to realize such narratives are in fact testament to intimate embodied relationships to their town and its natural features. We had just met up on Foggia's main square, and I sense he is somewhat nervous or unsure about the interview's purpose. He starts telling me in this tourist voice about the natural riches of Foggia that attract tourists. National Park Suceska, which is with its well-known rainforest, the mountain lakes of Zelengora, and the two rivers Drina and Čehotina. I rather cockily think by myself, I know this, yes, thank you. But he continues, and I quote him here. You know, we have natural riches in Foggia, the lakes and the top of Bosnia and Herzegovina at 2,386 meters, that's Maglic. Stefan is still listing facts about Foggia's nature, and with the same ease recites the exact height of the country's highest peak. He tells me he climbed Maglic himself for the first time this year. He called it an unforgettable experience. The tone of the interview changed after this. In fact, I knew he had been there, as a few days before we had been in a bar with a group of his friends, where he showed me pictures of his hike. I had done the same recently, and we excitingly shared our experiences of climbing it. Through this shifting insider-outsider positioning, I started to understand that his story so far is not an impersonal recital of tourist info, but his way of telling me what Foggia is to him. At first, Stefan's story seemed distant, speaking to the foreign new visitor to town, which I was in a way. This changed, however, while we walked and bonded over climbing Maglic, a physical insider experience that, according to Stefan, regrettably, not even many people from Foggia had done. Stefan also delineates the borders of Foggia through its rivers and lakes. The 2,386 meters of Maglic form the vertical boundary of what Bosnia and Herzegovina represent, but also what Foggia represents. And these territorial boundaries are overlaid with social natural boundaries. The tourist voice that I initially lamented is a widespread way of telling Foggia into existence. So that was the first part of the fieldwork that I did, and I think what potentially comes to the fore here, what makes these walking methodologies so insightful, or have been insightful in my own research, is that they very much tie in with the idea of improvisation. So Stefan didn't really have a very clear idea of where he wanted to take me, but throughout walking to town and talking about shared experience that we had before, we were in a way able to enter, and this is a quote here, a state of things in which something that will perhaps matter is unfolding amidst the usual activity of life. This is Lauren Berlant. Instead of assuming what people care about and where they go and what they do in everyday life, I actually join people, young people in this case, on those journeys through life, those very physical walks through life, and through the walks we stumbled upon the things that mattered to them, so to say. And it's very much those issues that we encountered on those walks that form in that way sort of the theoretical angle of my approach. Only based on the issues that we stumbled upon with my interlocutors, I found ways of describing and analyzing the politics landscape, so to say. So that was very much the starting point of my research, those walks and the issues that we encountered. I think that is also something that comes, that is expressed in another part that I'd like to read out to you. And this is in fact a part of my PhD that was set, or an event that was set next to the river Drina that you have seen before. And it's also next to a newly built water park next. Directly next to the water park is one of these abandoned beaches. Located at the confluence of Foggia's two rivers, it is where the warmer water of Jahotina and the cold stream of Drina can be experienced simultaneously. The beach used to be popular with all generations of Foggia, but especially among youth. The place has changed a lot. It was in a better state before the pools arrived and the water was clean. Now the place looks somewhat disregarded. When we walk past it, Mia, which is not an interlocutor, tells me that the water is polluted here and really dirty. It is not connected to a main path from town, and the path leading towards it worsens significantly after the entrance to the water park. The beach finds itself somewhat at a dead end, a feeling which is reinforced by its overall state. Still, because they used to come here a lot when they were younger, some of my interlocutors bring me here to see it. Some patches of grass dot the ground. Food packaging and bottles of beer are scattered around. The place is used occasionally for rafts to disembark, but the landing strip is steep and muddy. If it is because of the symbolic value of bringing together Drina and Jahotina, or because of its proximity to the city center, but Dorian tells me there are plans to redo this place and to construct a small dock for boats. He would like the place to go back to its old glory, but for now they are waiting for the project to happen. I quote him, Dorian here. Just the problem here is, as you can see, it's all overgrown. There's glass here. God forbid someone would step into it. There could be a small fountain here. It would all be concrete and benches and so on, just like by the sea. But I like that there is grass, which is natural. End of quote. I had walked here with Milos too, and he had told me about the plans to bring back some of the beach's former glory. The river banks would become more accessible, and a small park would arise here. Dorian is in support of the plans, and he really liked the design that he had seen for the new river beach. Will someone start carrying out those plans soon, I ask. He doesn't know. He says they will do it when they do it. We stop at this beach towards the end of our walk, and we are thinking about this plan that could or could not happen in the future. I try to finish the interview on a positive note, and I say that at least plans exist to make things better. That might be, Dorian says, but the plans are only waiting. There are plenty of those, but the only thing they do is wait. If the right people won't come, Foggia will have to hold on. I'd like to finish by saying how I think that these events here and many of the other events that I have encountered in my research help to bridge the understanding of the politics of landscape on quite a few different levels. So the knowledge that my interlocutors have given and shown is very much sort of everyday embodied knowledge. So it includes criticism of contemporary politics and connections between local politics, but at the same time it is also almost like romantic memories that I have come across, and the smell of rivers and the overall state of a mundane river beach, so to say. And those walks, one other thing that they do, I think, very well is that they relate in a very relational way. They show how the politics on those different levels are connected. So there's a quote by Tim Denso that I've used, which captures that pretty well, I think. So the walking methodology captures, this is a quote, the momentary impressions confronted, the peculiar evanescent atmospheres, the rhythms, the imminent sensations, and the physical effects of walking. Those are things that could not be confronted in sedentary interviews, so to say. And through those two small events that I have just shared, I have tried to explain to you how this idea of what the political is in Foggia, in these landscapes, are much broader and playing out in much more in everyday life than previous research has shown in politics and international relations on Bosnia and Herzegovina in the region in general. In no way is this a perfect research. I have been struggling quite a bit with, first of all, if you're walking, are you only recording and capturing what can be seen and what can be traversed? So where is the absent, so to say, these landscapes, and how can you capture the absent landscapes and the people that are not present, and the landscapes that have disappeared because of, for instance, genocide and because of environmental degradation? How can they be captured? So how to make sure that you don't fall into that like positivist trap of just recording what can be seen. I have combined it with ethnographic fieldwork as well, and what is called a critical examination of place, so to say, to put those walks in a context that goes further than just what we have seen and felt and recorded. But it's still an imperfection, and we can talk about it if you want to. The question here now, for myself at least, is seeing these walking methodologies as a so-called methodological intervention in political science and international relations is where would I like to take this, so to say. So I'm still unsure. I'm thinking of using this as a journal article, but I'm still quite unsure which audience to write to. So I can imagine that this is interesting for area studies in the area that I find myself in, or maybe in more general political science, international relations, methodology journals, or perhaps venturing out to other methodological journals in geography, for instance, because I know that there's a lot of ideas about walking methodologies in geography as well. I think I'm going to leave it here. I've been talking for just over half an hour. looking forward to any questions or comments or similar experience that you might have with walking and doing field work. And yes, thank you for your comments in advance. Cheers.